Guys, once again, thank you for logging into Yonkers Voice, the page, and watch all of our interviews. Remember, our interest in Yonkers Voice is not to endorse or oppose any candidate. We don't do that. Our only interest is to inform the people of Yonkers who is who, why they are running, and why they deserve your vote. At the end of the day, that decision is yours. Judge Daley, thank you for taking the time.
No, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, before we go further, I must say thank you to the Yonkers Public Library for making this room available to inform the community of who is who. Also, guys, don't forget that it's important that you register for Census 2020. This is extremely important. You must do it. You have to do it. Judge, let's get it on.
Very good.
Judge, this is not your first rodeo.
Correct. That's
How
correct.
How long you been on the bench, Judge?
I've been on the bench currently 20 years. I've had 2 terms, elected in 2000 and then elected again in 2010. Before that, my first stint on the bench was I was appointed in 1995 by Mayor Zaleski, and I ran a race that year because the appointment is not sufficient. You have to then run a race to get the full term, and I lost that to my current Chief Judge, Michael Martinelli. After that, they were happy enough, I guess, with my performance on the bench that they hired me as court attorney for the next 5 years. So I did research for judges, I did writing of opinions and things like that, of that nature. So I've really been in that courthouse working for the past 25 years.
25 years.
Mm-hmm.
A quarter of a century.
When I think in those terms, I say, wow, I've been doing anything for 25 years.
It's a long time.
It's a long time.
So I strongly believe that people should vote based on record. Okay, they shouldn't vote based on he's a friend of my friend, I like his face, I like the jokes that he throws out. We should vote based on record. Tell us, what is your record? Why should I vote for you?
Good. As I say, I've been there for 25 years doing this work. It's a hands-on, I like to call it a hands-on court, because so many of the people, at least in the civil side, come in without representation. They're lesser income people sometimes, or they feel they don't need representation for cases. For example, we have small claims part. So that's typically people bringing their own cases to court, suing maybe over a traffic accident, damage to a car, neighbors fighting maybe over something in their boundary, things like that. So it's important that my idea is that anybody coming into our court, whether they leave winning, having won the case or lost the case, they feel they got a fair shake, that they were heard by the judge and their arguments and their positions were considered. And that counts in the landlord and tenant part, which is a very large part of our work. When people come in to defend against city code violations, all these things, it's necessary for them to feel, well, I may not have won this day, but the judge heard me, and I feel I was treated fairly. And that, for the past 20 years, has been my objective, to make sure that the people feel that way.
You know, Judge, I talk to a lot of people on the street. Yonkers Voice has a very large follower.
Right.
And people talk to me all the time about the unfairness of our judicial system. They tell us that the lady on the scale, holding the scale, is really not blind at all.
I've heard that too. Yeah.
Okay, she's not blind. On your courtroom, is Judge Daley blind, or Judge Daley is not blind at all?
I would rather think Judge Daley sees exactly what's in front of him and even behind what may be in front of him. And also his hearing, let alone seeing. You can pick up many cues and clues from people and how they are.
So, Judge, 25 years serving the great city of Yonkers. We have primary coming up June 20th, 29th?
23rd.
June 23rd. You are the endorsed candidate for the Democratic. Am I correct?
Correct.
You are the endorsed. You have some challenger. There is some people that are running
Sure.
for your position.
Sure.
Why should the citizen of Yonkers give you the trust of another 10 years and not to one of the others? Because some people say new blood, new figures, new ideas. So we need to make it clear to those that are watching us that you are the man for that job. I know that experience, but we need to convince them, because at the end of the day, they are the ones making that decision.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to articulate. So why you, sir?
Mm-hmm. Again, you mentioned the experience, of course, but that is a very important component. Many times you see cases with precedent. You know somewhat what the issues are from before, from previous cases, and this builds up. This builds up a fund of knowledge and, as you say, I hope wisdom to be able to give the people justice, give the people fairness. Also, in my particular case, assuming I win this election, I'll begin in January as the new chief judge of the court, as Judge Martinelli will be retiring. In fact, that's one of the seats that's up, his seat, which will become vacant, so somebody is running for that. And as I'm sure you know, and many of the people realize, there was a vacancy that was appointed to by the mayor, which that person is also running, Judge McGrath, who's working now in the court. So, as I say, from January 1st of next year, with the help of the voters, I'll become chief judge by seniority. And I really look forward to the next few years of putting my imprint on the court. Although I have to say, we have a terrific court staff. We have a wonderful chief clerk in Miss Marissa Garcia, who's been there longer than I have, actually. And she does a fantastic job of helping our staff deal with all the challenges we have, from new procedures, directives all the time from the court system itself to us, and of course new legislation that was passed over the last year dealing with a lot of the issues that we as a frontline court deal with. So I'm really looking forward to the challenges of living up to that too over the next few years.
Now, Judge, we're going to use this opportunity of this interview to educate not just to educate, because they're all educated,
Mm-hmm.
but to inform them
Mm-hmm. Good.
of our judicial system in Yonkers.
Right.
There is family court, there is criminal court, there is this court, that court. Which one is your court? And what's the difference? So people understand that maybe it's important to come out and vote, because this is something that I'm involved. Even though every election is important, but let's take this opportunity to inform and educate the people of Yonkers.
Well, our court is the one court where the average citizen is more likely to interact with than other courts. For example, you talk about family court. Thank goodness not every family has problems that are so severe that they have to end up in family court. Not every family is arguing about custody of children when their parents are separated. So that's where you go for family court. Criminal cases, we have all kinds of criminal cases coming to our court, but the more serious ones, the felonies, typically don't stay in our court. They are transferred up to higher court. We take care of the arraignments, setting of bail if necessary, and so forth, and then they're tried up in White Plains in the state Supreme Court. But our court consists of, as I mentioned before, landlord and tenant, which is the basic issues of landlords suing to get paid rent, and tenants suing or defending because they need repairs, which is a very important aspect of it, keeping the housing stock in good shape by keeping it up to repair. We have small claims court, which, as I indicated before, the disputes between people, ordinary people, and disputes of under $5,000 in value. We also have in our court a unique court, which is called the Integrated Domestic Violence Court. I happen to be one of the 2 judges who presides over that for the last 12 or 14 years. And what that is, that involves couples, whether married or not married, who have an intimate relationship, and perhaps there's some domestic violence has occurred. So there's a criminal case where one of the parties is a defendant, and then one or both of the parties may have gone to family court to seek some kind of relief, perhaps custody over the children that they share, or perhaps an order of protection. So what happens with those is that those family cases get referred back to our court, where I hear those cases along with the criminal case that's already in our court, so we can be consistent in terms of treatment of the issues, in terms of custody issues and order of protection issues and so forth. So we've tried to do that, have that the court for, as I say, about 12 years. And I'd like to say there's very little recidivism, very little return to court by defendants in those cases on criminal charges. Sometimes they come back to court because there's a change in circumstances over the custody issue, and they might come back to court on the custody issues. And hopefully I try to encourage them as the kids get older, they're going to be faced with more challenges, try to work it out, even if they're not living together, even if they're estranged, that it's best for their children if they continue to try to work it out. Best for their children's health, psychologically, and so forth.
Judge,
yes.
there is something pressing nowadays because of legislation that passed.
Right.
Bail reform. It's a problem. I don't know if it's a problem to you, but to a lot of people in the community, it's a problem. Not that we do not understand the theory behind bail reform. I think most of us understand that it was necessary to have a bail reform. But now that it's implemented, and we've seen how it's been implemented, and we look at the decisions that the judges don't have discretion, it's a problem. It's a problem. We see people being arrested, go in front of you and other judges, and released within an hour just to re-offend again, and it's back and forth, back and forth. Can you tell us anything about the bail reform? How is your opinion on that?
Well, as a judge, I really have no opinion per se on what the legislature has done. That's their province. They've done it. If there's some issue with some of the legislation that comes before me in a particular way, I might end up writing a decision stating what I may see as maybe constitutional infirmities or some other kind of drawback. But in general, I can't give you a general horseback opinion. I will say that as far as the way it's going in our court, we do unfortunately have repeat people who offend quickly, but there are provisions even in the new bail reform to address persistent offenders and also people who are persistent in refusing to return to court. Because the theory of bail, as you know and you indicate, I realize you understand this, and I'm sure most of the viewers, if not all, understand, under our system, a criminal defendant is presumed innocent. The people must prove him, the DA must prove him guilty, him or her. And the theory behind bail was always simply to make sure that the person returned to court of their own volition. And under the old system, if you saw a person who was persistent on his record of not coming to court, where a lot of bench warrants had to be issued and so forth, you were entitled, you had the discretion to set bail as you saw fit. Some of that discretion, as you indicate under the new bail statutes, was removed from us to a degree. But we still have ability to make sure that persistent offenders and persistent people who ignore the mandate to come back to court can be dealt with in a more serious way. So we're hoping, it's been 2-3 months since the new legislation. I know there have been newspaper stories, TV stories about certain things that have happened. And I know in our court we're trying to address that in a good, even way that's consistent with what the legislature passed and intended. and what we see as a practical approach to the problem.
Now,
and one that keeps people safe too.
Of course, sir. Now, there is another thing that also needs to be addressed as far as community goes.
Mm-hmm.
It's the judicial system itself. People don't think it's fair.
Mm-hmm.
They ask for an overhaul on the judicial system. Very heavy fines for certain people, certain crimes, some sentence no fit crime. Blacks suffer more from injustice from the judicial system. So many people are demanding and asking for an overhaul on the system itself. Bail reform, yes, they're addressing it, but what about the judicial system? How you feel about that, sir?
Well, again, I'm part of the judicial system. It's something that has evolved under our common law system. It's evolved really over hundreds of years from very primitive beginnings. And it's become more sophisticated over time, hopefully with more tools to determine the truth in a particular issue, to determine justice. But again, it's a creature in our system, it's a creature of the society, it's a creature of the Constitution to an extent. And if the people wish to come to some point where they wish to alter it in fundamental ways, that's their right in a democracy to do so. The system is always constantly being, you might say, tweaked, responding to pressures of the moment that are legitimate pressures, some of the things you mentioned. And I like to think that at least in the American system and in our state here, that the system is adaptable and flexible so that by and large it can adapt. Part of the feeling about court is nobody wants to go to court. Even the person suing would rather be doing something else with their life than sitting in a courtroom trying to get money or get some kind of justice on some issue. And I understand that. Traffic court is another one. People are in there to answer traffic tickets. They want to resolve their issue with as little fuss as possible. And, this is understood, I'm sure, by my colleagues as well. So, again, we give justice, we do justice as fairly as we can, I hope and believe. But again, when the people are not satisfied, they have every right to set up a different system or, explore alternatives.
Well, Judge, time is up. Okay, time is up. But before we go,
yes,
I want you to take this opportunity
yes,
to speak directly to the people of
Thank
Yonkers.
you.
They are watching you, and thousands will be watching you through the day. Tell them whatever you feel that needs to be said.
Thank you. People of Yonkers, I'm very proud to have served you for the past 25 years in the Yonkers City Court. It has come time for me to run for re-election again, and I appeal to you for support in this re-election effort. There are other seats open. A vote for me does not necessarily exclude a vote for other people whom you might be happy to support as a judge. As I say, we have 3 openings coming up, mine and 2 others, and having been endorsed by the Democratic Party and facing a primary on June 23rd, I hope and ask for your support at that time. Thank you very much.
This concludes our interview for today. Don't forget, guys, come to the Yonkers Public Library. If you don't have a card, it's time to get one. And don't forget that books are food for the mind. Come and feed your brains. And
great, I love that.
And don't forget, Census 2020, of utmost importance. Register, inquire about it. Don't be afraid if you're undocumented or whatever. Inquire. Call Wilson Terrero. He will give you all the information. There is a workshop happening Saturday. Stay on Yonkers Voice. We will publish information about that. So thank you for watching. And stay on for our next interview with Yonkers Superintendent Dr. Edwin Quesada, coming up at 2 o'clock within 20 minutes. Stay tuned on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.